doing what I wanna, innovate what I'm gonna. You can hate all you wanna, but you're still in your pajama. Now I ain't a prima donna, but I built what I wanna. You can say my vision's wrong, the tune of my song broke my thumb, banging to my own drum. Broke my thumb, banging to my own drum. Broke my thumb, banging to my own drum. Hootin' and clapping, boots I am a strapping, a click click clacking. Hurrah! Bootstrapping in America. Yeah, bootstrapping in America.
Christy, we're back. Bootstrapping in America.
Welcome to Bootstrapping in America, where we interview some of the hottest entrepreneurs. Our guest today is an acclaimed author, speaker, and wellness industry pioneer whose practice focuses on the tenets of mind-body health. She worked with the likes of Barbara Streisand, Joni Mitchell, Calvin Klein, Laura Dern, and companies such as Hyatt Hotels and American Express. Please welcome Bija Bennett. Thank
you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually really excited to talk about this. I first want you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us some background.
Sure. Well, I think of it this way. I started in the performing arts, Christy, but I had a minor in anthropology, ethnomusicology, and I was very interested in Eastern philosophy. So this brought me to India, and that's where I studied in the arts, but I also began studying with some spiritual masters and yoga philosophy. So I kind of went from the performing arts into the healing arts. And now I'm merging the two, I guess you could say. And I met Deepak Chopra in probably the mid to late 80s. And he invited me to teach at one of the first medical spas in the country, where they had Ayurvedic physicians from India and Western allopathic medical doctors. And I became, I guess you could say, a yoga therapist, which I had trained in. And Dr. Chopra also, so I worked with thousands of patients there over those years. This was in Massachusetts before he was in California. And he became kind of a mentor to me. So I began co-teaching some of his seminars and leading these, and worked with physicians. And I kind of authored books like he did. And one of my books is published in 11 languages. And I then eventually started a yoga lifestyle company, where we did partner with Global Hyatt Corporation at the time. And so I've had a great opportunity to not only work in a clinical way with thousands of patients, and develop programs in the business world, but I also did have the opportunity to work with celebrities. My favorite one was George Harrison.
Oh, nice.
And Elizabeth Taylor. So that was a whole nother story. But I was able to bring these kind of ancient technologies into the modern world and see how it affects real people.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to back up though. At what point sort of in your career, or maybe it's after you got your degree and you went to India, that you really wanted to focus on sort of, call it the wellness space? What was sort of the trigger for you to say, this is the space I want to live in?
Interesting. Well, it's interesting because my work with yoga and Ayurveda, so Ayurveda brought me into the wellness space. Ayurveda is the traditional medicine of India. Yoga and Ayurveda are kind of sister sciences, but they're both based on these early systems of holistic health and self-care. That's really wellness. These methodologies kind of provide a full spectrum of teachings for every layer of the human experience. Because the ancient yogis and medicine men and women didn't see the body as kind of a set of biological or processes. They saw us as a variety of layers, from the body, physiology, mind, behavior, spiritual aspects. And this is wellness. So in a sense, I think I could maybe say that I was in wellness to begin with, but the word was never used.
Right.
And yoga also at that time was more of a spiritual practice, but now it's almost misunderstood as kind of separate positions to be mastered, when it's not. It's an ancient practical system for accessing, healing the body and mind. And so this is what wellness really is.
So speak about that for a moment. What's more difficult to achieve? Physical wellness, emotional wellness, or tickets to Barbara Streisand?
Oh, that would be the hardest. Probably, I have no idea, but good question, because the way I look at it and the way science does now, physical and emotional wellness is exactly the same. Emotions are physiological. So science is understanding that now. The emotions act as a bridge between our bodies and minds. So each of us, we're a psychosomatic network, but that doesn't mean that whatever we're experiencing isn't real or to be taken seriously. It's quite the contrary. Just means that psychosomatic means that our bodies, minds, and our emotions are intimately intertwined. So when we affect one, we affect another. That's the whole mind-body connection. And managing our emotions now is considered kind of a form of disease prevention. So if we heal our emotions, we heal our bodies, and vice versa. We also, affect the mind. So if you meditate, you affect the body. If you work out, you also affect the mind. So these are, becoming more well-known. And I might say that one of my clients was scientist Candace Pert, and she wrote a book called Molecules of Emotion. She said that mind doesn't dominate the body, it becomes the body, that body and mind are one. So I hope that's kind of how I perceive it, not one versus the other, Tony.
How about the different types of yoga that's out there now? Like, you have Bikram yoga, which I've happened to do when I was younger. And you also have yoga, like you talk about, as just a spiritual awakening and a way of life. Touch on those for a moment.
Well, my yoga teacher always said, my yoga teacher was TKV Desikachar. I was very fortunate to kind of be initiated in part of a lineage. I mean, I'm a modern woman, but I'm connected deeply into these traditions. These are lineages that were handed down, centuries and centuries to make sure that the purity of the teaching was there. What's happened now, I think, is that yoga has become very westernized, kind of Lululemon yoga, where it may seem like there are various styles, but there's really only one. And yoga itself is a series of 5 different sciences that include asana, or the postures of yoga, which is what you see now. Bikram is mostly, he focused directly on the postures, which isn't wrong, but there's also conscious breathing, pranayama, chanting or sound, which has a vibratory effect on the system. All the practices of meditation do come from the yoga tradition, and also ritual and prayer. And what I've learned through the technologies I've learned is called Vini Yoga. You need to adapt to the person that's in front of you. So Tony, you might not need something different than Christy or someone else here. So you have to really look at the person in front of you and be able to see who they are, and give them something that they either need or they're interested in. If they're interested in standing on their head, that's one. If they're interested that they have a knee problem, that might be another practice. So it's a huge kind of spectrum of sciences, and in some ways the West has focused more on the materialistic aspect of it.
Fantastic. All right, Christy, give her the business aspect of this whole thing.
Yes, for sure. So I want to make sure I understand. You have you are B2B to C, and it looks like you're also B2C. Mm-hmm. So you do some direct to customer work, but you also do a lot of corporate work, and you touched on it a little bit, and I also mentioned it in the intro. When you look at like Hyatt or American Express. But you have, some Fortune 500 companies and major, medical institutions. So really walk us through that. But also, I really want to know how you got your first corporate customer.
Well, my first real corporate customer was Hyatt Hotels. This was after my book, Emotional Yoga, was published. I was asked to author a yoga program at a hotel, and my colleague, Gary Krafsow, who's one of my teachers, said, let's maybe do lots of hotels. So I had the opportunity to, because being in Chicago, go directly to Hyatt. And we entered through the spa the VP of spa operations, and they were changing their programs. They created something called Stay Fit at Hyatt. And I created this company called Yoga Away. It's an international lifestyle company. And we merged the company with Hyatt. It became Yoga Away at Hyatt. And what we did was we designed programs for the traveler and for hotel and spa guests. And we were fortunate, we created 4 significant videos this was before streaming video. And they were all up on the hotel channels that still exist. And they were able to be in 3,000 hotels across, domestically.
Mm-hmm.
But as we started to work with Hyatt, we developed products such as mats and bags and DVDs. We trained teachers in all the Hyatt spas that they had at the time. And they had never had, a branded yoga program. And so we had a great opportunity. I think you could say we were one of the first yoga programs in the spa and hospitality industry.
Yeah.
So
how did it look from when you first did your first one, the program then, to now? Because you started the company, 15 years ago? I don't know if I have that right.
You are correct. I think we were an early adopter of this. It's interesting, we were talking about wellness. Wellness is now a $4.3 trillion industry. It's everything from medical tourism to wellness tourism to beauty, fitness, wellness, lifestyle, real estate. We kind of fit in, yoga. I'm trying to actually, through the Global Wellness Institute, convince people that yoga is not complementary medicine, that it can be used in the healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk further because now, during this particular time, I think wellness and personal wellness has become probably one of the most important things that there is.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that actually, because during the pandemic, what are you seeing, let's say, in the workplace, that maybe these issues didn't exist before, or if they did, they just weren't as prominent as they are now with the pandemic.
Sure. Well, as we all know, the workplace has been fundamentally redefined. I mean, so right now it's at home. I always worked from home, but now it's really at home. So I'm seeing people and just some of the seminars and things that I'm seeing online right now is stress, anxiety, fatigue. It's higher now than before. I mean, in the workplace, it used to be engagement, keeping focus and those kinds of things, but we're almost working 24/7. So and we don't even have established breaks, like we had lunch breaks or, you could take breaks, but now we need to create them. And even myself, it's happened to me. It's kind of like Zoom fatigue. I'm sitting at a computer for hours. And even if I'm talking to people, it'd be really nice if I saw you. There's very little human interaction, such as touch, and there's a different energetic, don't you think?
Right. Oh yeah, I'm a hugger, like by nature. Like even in business, I'm one of those where instead of shaking hands, I'm a hugger.
I am too. I am, and I mean now I'm going out a little bit, but and especially
now it's elbow bumps.
But even I've noticed also sometimes that women have it worse because. Sometimes we're the primary caretakers and kids are showing up in business meetings. Things are feeling chaotic and we're having to learn how to blend life and work. Yeah. And, it's not work-life balance. It's kind of it's all together right now.
It's a new state for sure.
It's a new state and we have to learn how to multitask. I don't know if there's separation. I just think we need to learn how to, I guess you could say, find the time to take for ourselves. I set up something and it says breathe, at certain times during the day. And I mean, I have to like peel myself off the chair to do something. Right. It's definitely challenging, but there are things that we can do. And that's what I'm trying to do is to support people.
Do you think taking those breaks and getting away from the Zoom call or getting away from the computer for that, whether it's 5 or 7 minutes, or taking that lunch is probably the best thing you can do to relieve stress?
If you could take, ideally, Tony, 15 minutes a day to do something for yourself, I don't think it really matters. Eat better, or, take a walk outside. Maybe that's your yoga practice for the day.
Jump on a Peloton.
Sure.
Jump on a Peloton. Ideally for me, yoga, the word yoga means to link to something. So in some sense, we're having a yoga experience because we're connecting together, the three of us. And it's a dialogue. Really, it's about creating a dialogue with yourself. So if you pay attention to your breath, which is something we might even be able to do on the show, you're linking to something inside yourself. That would be the key, to do a yoga experience, not just necessarily a posture, but to do something that brings you back to yourself. That, I think, is a powerful experience, and I do think it is automatically stress relieving.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to talk about sort of the country's level of stress, because obviously it's higher, now more than ever. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I read is that the U.S. is among, the 10 most stressed countries, if you will. And these were fascinating to me. 55% of Americans say they're stressed, during the day, like hands down every day. American Institute of Stress said that there's like 33% of people that feel extreme stress. And then 77 say it affects their physical, and 73% say it impacts their mental. So when you start to look at this, some of those things you talked about, some of those tactics you talked about, it sounds like it can have a tremendous impact on anybody who can employ those every day, like having those grounding efforts.
Absolutely.
But I walked through those stats because I think they're so incredibly powerful. But one of the things you have done is, on your website, you have an immense amount of content that's helpful for the everyday person. It's free. You have an amazing blog. But I saw on there that you have 6 key principles, sort of the optimal wellness model. Can you just walk through that for our viewers? Because I think that some of those are really, and you don't even have to run through all 6, but just even a few of those I thought were really powerful.
The yoga model actually looks at us as 5 layers. Okay. I kind of broke them up, but the first one is the body. And, we have structural kinds of things. And so movement, any kind of movement to do during the day is extremely important. We weren't designed to sit here and not move. So anything you can do, look at babies and kids, they're moving all the time, and that's what keeps them healthy. It also, pumps the blood through our system, and our skin looks better, and all of those kinds of things. So whatever moves you, you should move. Really important thing. And that's one of the principles. Another one is breathing, which you can do along with breath. Conscious breathing is one of the greatest secrets of yoga, I think. It can be practiced by anyone. We could do it now. There are 4 parts of the breath. There's the inhale, the pause after inhale, the exhale, and the pause after exhale.
Never thought of it that way.
And this is pretty easy to think of. If you focus your attention right now, if we just said, okay, let's just bring your attention to the breath. And as soon as you begin to bring your attention to the breath, it changes, okay? If I were to say, begin to deepen your breath and focus your attention on the exhale. So normal inhalation, longer exhalation. And if you just did something really simple like that for 6 breaths, what you would do is you actually create a parasympathetic response to the nervous system, which means you calm using the breath. Real simple, don't have to pay for anything, don't have to go to a Peloton or anything like that, or a piece of equipment, and you calm the system. If you do the opposite and you increase the length of the inhalation, which you have to be careful, and pause, you create a sympathetic response. So if you are kind of dragging or down or low energy, you begin gradually to increase the length of the inhalation. So that's using the breath.
what do you think of meds in the process of really addressing stress and anxiety?
Well, I'm not a doctor, but I do recommend that anyone who feels, high levels of stress and feels they're at risk, that they do absolutely see a doctor. As a yoga therapist and someone who's worked with this for a while, these kinds of methodologies work best for people who are being cared for holistically. And if there's any danger that way, I totally suggest that. If there's a thyroid problem or any, you're feeling really panicky or any of those things, definitely do go to a doctor. But I think the mind-body approach really focuses on sustaining wellness and proactively maintaining your mental and physical and emotional health. So through these techniques that you described, through self-inquiry, through meditation, through breathing practices, through movement, and through the practice, what we call Vini Yoga, we can layer these practices. So you're actually sitting down intentionally and saying, I'm going to do a specific practice for how I feel. I actually had a very difficult few months because my mom passed away during this time.
I'm sorry.
And thank you. She was 93. My dad was 97. He passed away also within this 2-year period. And being by myself, dealing with grief and all of those kinds of things, I really looked to these practices to help me, deal with them. I allowed myself to grieve. I allowed myself to talk to people. I asked for help. Those are all the kinds of things. If I had needed any certain kind of something further than that, I would definitely have reached out to a doctor. So
right.
I think meds are good. That's where Western medicine comes in. And yet there's this, we use these other technologies to strengthen the immune system, to give ourselves daily practices so that we can manage our own stress levels, help with our relationships and our families. And so both together, I think, are a wise choice.
Sure. So during the pandemic, I want to turn this to you as an entrepreneur, as leading your companies. During the pandemic, did you learn anything about yourself or change any of sort of the, routines that you have?
Well, I learned that I'm a really good cook. Out of necessity. I lost, not that this is a matter of health or wellness, but I lost like 3 pounds because I wasn't going out to restaurants anymore. Or I went to the New York Times cookbook. I had to cook for myself, and I chose really good things and made them interesting. I like food and wine. So that was something I learned about myself, and so I've taken that on a little bit more as a habit, and I think I've learned to listen to people more, maybe. Yeah. And I've also, but most especially, and this is kind of a theme, I guess, that I've learned to listen to myself more. Because I've been by myself. I've had to be by myself. I've had to deal with some loneliness issues. I've realized maybe there's a difference between loneliness and being alone.
Sure.
You can be lonely, and I've worked on that from an emotional yoga standpoint of really doing my meditations to feel it. And maybe I will cry, and it's okay. But being alone is something else, and it's extremely valuable. As much as it is that I'm an extrovert. I'm a social person, so I miss that.
Yeah,
we're starting to do that more. So there has to be a balance. And I also found out perhaps that I'm much more resilient than I thought I was.
Aren't we all?
Yeah,
I think we all are, and we ought to give ourselves credit for that.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, so I know we only have a couple of minutes left, and so I want to try to squeeze a couple of these in. but you are an author of 5 seminal books. Your most recent one, and correct me if I got this one wrong, but Emotional Yoga, How the Body Can Heal the Mind.
Mhm.
So just tell us give us like your favorite part of the book or your biggest takeaway of the book. And promise, people will still buy it.
At the time, my biggest takeaway was when I started the book, because at that time I had been practicing yoga for almost 20 years, not much more. I was strong, athletic, I used to be a dancer, and although I could virtually get myself, I could climb mountains and lift weights, but when there was an emotional crisis, I was weak. I completely fell apart. So I realized it didn't matter how flexible I was or how physically strong I was on the outside. When there was something like an emotional situation, I wasn't strong. So I looked at the yoga tradition and found that there was a real relationship between yoga and emotions and the tools of yoga. And I found that these tools could help us access, transform, and heal our bodies and minds. And so this practice was I guess you could say, how I created emotional yoga. It grew out of my own personal needs and the needs of my students and friends. And so there's just a full spectrum of teaching, from postures to emotional practices, to meditations, to something I call the emotional walkabout, which takes you on a walk through your own emotions and allows you to be engaged in your emotions, and really gives you the tools for self-healing and growth. So that's kind of where the book, how it came about, and that it's still useful today. I'm writing many of my blogs and the videos and come from that book. And I've just kind of worked with them and added some of the new science that is evidence-based to show that these are really valuable practices.
You have 5 books. Who's your favorite child of the 5 books?
Actually, my book, Breathing into Life, it's a book of poetry on the breath. It was originally done for Hazelden, who are the recovery, program.
Yeah.
But it's about recovering wholeness through body, mind, and breath. But there are a variety of poems. It's still available now. And it's an easy way to read about the breath and get right into practices by just, it's written kind of it's written like the Nike ads were kind of in the early 90s, and it has a lot of space. So
I remember those.
What?
I
It allows you
remember
to think and breathe and have space. So that's my favorite of all of them.
Awesome. Love it. So one piece of advice that you would give to somebody if they wanted to start a business, say similar to yours. So as an entrepreneur, what is that one piece of advice that you would give them from a business perspective?
I was going to say, trust your intuition, but
that's a good one.
I am an entrepreneur. I didn't come in through the business world. I'm coming in now through the wellness world. But I think there's tremendous opportunity there, even in real estate, to bring wellness in and make sure that it's actually affecting real people. It's not just about making money. It's, if you focus somewhere along the line on some wellness aspect, I'm sure that that's going to become very popular, no matter what it is in business.
Right. So I love that. But I'm gonna end with having you share with our viewers where they can either get in contact with you or just find all of your wonderful information. And
Sure. Well, my website is Bija B, that's Bija Bennett, Bija B, bijab.com. There's a contact form there. I think it can also be info@bijab.com. And one of the things I offer, besides all those videos and articles, is an amazing personal wellness quiz that I call Audit Your Wellness. It's free. It's a survey that lets you see your current state of wellness in those 5 dimensions: body, energy, mind, behavior, spirituality. You go in, take it. It's really short.
It's right on your website.
You'll get a score. It's a yoga therapy tool but I made it more accessible for people. So that would be something that I'd like to offer people.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for joining us and for all the wonderful tips to help us with all of this stress that I think we're all going through now. So thank you so much.
We're all in it together,
We
and
are
I
all
really
in it
appreciate it. Thank you
Words
so
to
much.
live by. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick 90-second break. We're going to come back with more Tasty Trade after this. Let's Taste Trade Live.
It's our honor to highlight some of the best and brightest entrepreneurs in Chicago and beyond. Being entrepreneurs ourselves, we understand the ebbs and flows of building a business. From the inception of Tasty Trade, we've focused on pushing the financial industry forward, with an emphasis on empowering self-directed investors. We're leading the industry in financial education and engaging, actionable content, as well as the online brokerage space with world-class support and technology. We're committed to making investing accessible to all, and we hope you'll join us in changing the world.